Welcome to this K Matters. Today we're delighted to be joined by Matt Kilby from Wellspring, who's going to talk to us about from disclosure to impact, how modern tools are helping to transform the process of research and innovation management. And so we look forward to what Matt's got to say. As I say, do post questions as we go along and we can pick them up at the end. But without further ado, I'll hand over to Matt and appear at the end. Thanks, Matt.
Brilliant. Yeah, cheers. Thanks, Stuart. Appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all today. And yeah, as a very brief way of introduction, I'm Matt from Wellspring, based in London. I've been here for just coming up to 8 years now, and it's great to have you with us today. Our goal today isn't to pitch a product, but to share practical insights, examples, and trends that will help you rethink how you go from a researcher's initial idea to tangible outcomes faster, more efficiently, and with greater impact. And with that, let's jump right in. Rita, if you can hit on the next slide, that'd be great. So if we picture an ecosystem where research disclosures, patents, startup tracking, and partnerships are no longer managed through scattered spreadsheets, disparate systems, or solutions that teams view as a database, but instead unified in a single intelligent platform. That's our vision. And here's some insight that highlights why this matters. In 2023-2024 academic year, UK universities were granted over 1,000 new patents, saw thousands of new companies spun out, of which many are student-led, and a number of university-owned spin-outs as well. And on top of this, contract research income grew, collaborative research income grew, and these are some serious numbers taken from HESA and HEPSIS. And they speak to an increasingly complex innovation pipeline for teams managing disclosures, protecting IP, nurturing spinouts across departments. A unifying modern tool isn't now just a nice to have, it's essential. And with that, Rita, if we can jump onto the next slide. Now, it would be naive for me to come on here and say that every office is the same, whether that's a university, a government agency, an investor, or a corporate company. But one of the first things we've learned from speaking with our academic and research organizations all over the world is that no two offices are the same. And sometimes that's because of culture. That could be because of staffing levels. It's quite prominent in news and press at the moment around that particular area. Sometimes the technology areas that they specialize in, and sometimes just the systems that those teams have in place. Even so, most start their process from a similar entry point, whether that's deemed internally as a disclosure, a submission, or most commonly that we see, I see in my role, is an invention disclosure form. What's striking though is just how lengthy the workflows can be around this capture. Across universities worldwide, we see incredibly complex processes for how researchers and inventors submit that information and for how it's then stored and acted upon by those university teams. There's some examples on screen here around how you may be kind of processing them or may have processed them in the past. And in 2025, the reality is that software should be front and center in streamlining these processes. Universities often talk about staff shortages and being overworked, yet many still use workflows that add hours upon hours of unnecessary administration to the start of each new project. Why make the first step harder than it needs to be? Now, of course, it would be naive to suggest there's a single perfect way to capture disclosures online. Every institution has its own realities. But if you look at the HEPSIS data, it's pretty clear that the institutions with growing disclosure numbers are often the ones that make submissions straightforward. And many have it clearly visible on their websites or their intranets or running programs or training to educate those individuals across the entities that they want to be receiving that information from as to how simple it should be to get that information to them. Rita, if you can just jump onto the next slide, then that's one of the reasons why Wellspring has built Wellspring Evolve to work for all types of offices. Our solution enables from the fully online submission that can capture, auto create records, set up workflows, reminders, and tasks, all in a very simple and easy manner, through to a more old school, so to speak, option where somebody maybe goes onto a website, downloads a form, has a meeting, sends it via email. Either way, the goal is to reduce friction, cut wasted admin time, and let teams focus on the work that really matters. Now, if you're not familiar with online submissions when it comes to disclosures, or you have queries or concerns, or you may have used some in the past that did work or some that maybe didn't, then we'd love to hear from you as we continue to shape our disclosure management process to fit your needs. And we understand that every office is unique. But the one thing that they have all been sharing with us is the need for processes that help, not hinder their mission. And in 2025, the technology is here to make that happen. Now, what you can see on screen here is just a very quick snapshot taken from the Wellspring Evolve solution around those different disclosures that an organization may be managing. They have the ability to define their own stages, their own processes, and it's very easy to update and kind of move through that pipeline management process. If you look on screen here, there are 3 boxes in draft. If you were working in a real live environment as an Evolve client, to update that from draft to in process, you could simply drag and drop that box into the next step, and that could trigger a whole series of notifications, tasks, alerts, and actions across a busy team. And this is just one of the many ways that we're helping with disclosure management through Evolve. Rita, let me just jump onto the next slide. That'll be great. Now that we've acknowledged the different entry points that organizations take, whether it's through formal online submissions, downloadable forms, or something in between, the next question is, what separates those organizations who just process disclosures from those who consistently turn them into real-world impact? Over decades of working with research organizations, universities, colleges worldwide, through both Wellspring and IP Pragmatics, we've seen a clear pattern emerge. The offices that deliver strong, sustainable results year after year tend to excel in 2 areas above all others. First, they proactively manage their technology opportunities using a rigorous stage gate system. That means that every idea or disclosure is guided through a structured evaluation process with clear criteria at each step. Secondly, they're willing to make those tough decisions. If there isn't solid evidence that a case has support from academics, a well-documented route to commercialization, or measurable impact, they simply don't proceed with the project at that time, and for sure don't go down the patent route for the sake of it. This discipline protects resources and focuses effort where it matters most. Now, doing this once or twice is possible manually, but doing it at scale year after year across dozens or hundreds of cases, that's where technology makes all the difference. To make those 2 best practices repeatable, you need visibility, a complete overview of every disclosure, where it sits in the process, who's responsible, its origin, and its background. And without that, opportunities slip through the cracks. So what you saw on that previous screen is kind of how Wellspring Evolve can help you set up those clear stage gates, maintain a team-wide overview, and improve stakeholder relations through built-in integrations. These could be direct email plugins, not clunky drag and drop systems, meaning updates and decisions flow naturally as part of your work. And the result, better informed decisions, faster, with stronger alignment across the team. Now, having mentioned not necessarily always going down the patent route, now we've defined those new stage gate processes with the use of Evolve or to kind of help you in that oversight of kind of the reforming of your office. With new stage gates processes in place, better oversight of disclosures and assessment criteria, teams can now have a stronger conviction around their IP strategy. Now, needless to say, certain technical areas such as biotech, pharma, and engineering, patents are often deemed absolutely critical. They can form the foundation for exclusive or non-exclusive licenses, providing a legal framework that protects the innovation and, of course, can incentivize commercialization. But, and this is important, it can be costly and resource intensive to maintain. I wanted to share a standout example of a university organization licensing deal that highlights the power of a strong IP portfolio around the University of Queensland and their recent activity with Sanofi. It underscores why managing your IP carefully is crucial. Strong patents can unlock significant value, but the process is complex and demands strategic oversight. So what should you be thinking about before you dive into patenting? And Rita, if you can go to the next slide, please. The way that we view this here at Wellspring is, and one of the ways that we view this across these kind of 4 key segments. When you're looking at this from an IP management perspective, have you conducted a thorough IP landscape or freedom to operate analysis? Understanding the existing patents and technologies out there helps you avoid costly legal conflicts down the line, and also helps you position your innovation strategically. These don't always need to be completed by your attorneys, with consulting teams and AI tools now providing faster and often cheaper alternative routes for assessment. And all of this information should then be able to be seamlessly captured back into your innovation management system, so that you can have that long-term storage, that long-term review, and help you guide better decisions going forward. When it comes to patenting, consider how quickly your invention can realistically reach the market. Patents can take years to grant, and by that time, the technology landscape might have shifted, and timing is everything. And when you talk about patent timing, it's good to take a kind of like a reality check around it. A crucial fact to keep in mind is all of the granted patents worldwide, only under 20% last their full 20-year term, with over 60% often no longer in force after 10 years. So this underscores kind of the importance of managing your IP portfolio carefully, not assuming that every patent will be active for 2 decades, that there's that patent that you have in force now that is revenue generating is going to continue to do so. And also the other way that patent portfolio that you have established, is it being optimized? Have you reviewed this systematically? How can it guide your future filings so that you are kind of being cost efficient and mindful going forward? One of the other points to consider would be around learning from others. One of the smartest moves is to learn from your peers, and KUK do a great work in terms of kind of the networking, the conferences. There's been lots of CCF funding for shared innovation and shared TT practices recently. And that's a great first step, to use the networks and forums where other tech transfer offices share their insights. How are they managing their IP portfolios? What strategies are they using to maximize value while minimizing risk? This collective knowledge is invaluable. And at Wellspring, we harness that as our client base. We run each year user groups where we bring together all of our clients in specific jurisdictions, give them the opportunity to share best practice around how they are working outside of the system and inside of the system. Our next one is upcoming in September in London. So if anybody who is an existing client or would like to kind of just learn a little bit more around Wellspring, our solutions, and the other type of people and organizations who are using it, it's free to attend, and we would love to have you here as well. And then finally, to own your own data. This can't be overstated, owning your own data. Modern IP management systems can remind you about upcoming deadlines, renewal fees, and important tasks. Whilst your attorneys are essential partners, they shouldn't be the sole custodians of your IP knowledge. You want your university organization to have real-time oversight of your entire IP portfolio. In 2025 as well, that probably also shouldn't sit on an Excel sheet buried on somebody's personal drive as well. Next slide, please, Rita. So why Wellspring evolve? Well, when it comes to IP in today's fast-moving technology landscape, controlling your IP portfolio is more complex than ever. Traditional methods just can't keep up with the pace, and that's why an agile, integrated approach is essential. First, let's talk about that stage gate review process. This process ensures your IP goes through thorough, well-timed evaluations at every key stage of development. But without an agile system, this can quickly become overwhelming, disorganized, and that defined process soon goes out the window. Second of all, maintaining accurate IP, which is enabled seamlessly through Wellspring Evolve through our integration to Patent and Trademark Office databases worldwide, means that this global connectivity allows to keep your data updated in real time. This should be considered a must-have feature for all forward-thinking innovation offices when managing international patents and the such. Without this, your decisions, your reporting could be based on outdated or incomplete information. And at the bare minimum, there'll be a lot of administration work going on to kind of overworked and understaffed offices to do manual data entry without these functions. The third one, when it comes to agility and kind of managing your IP portfolio, is to consider IP renewals and annuities. Now, there's long been the view that these can only be managed by your attorneys, but that's definitely not the case in 2025 and going forward. And having direct integrations with wholly owned IP renewals and annuities tools like Wellspring does with Wellspring Astria means that you have control over your renewal deadlines and fees. You can help ensure that nothing slips through the cracks. You can simplify the contracting process and help save you from costly oversights with detailed forecasting tools as well. A fourth key point to consider when it comes to IP and where Wellspring Evolve can help from an agile system point of view is to have that clear link between IP, where that IP originated, where it started from that disclosure. And if we take our mind back to those earlier slides where we said about, okay, we've worked out how to capture that disclosure. To maintain that efficiency, you need to be able to continue to create that link between that disclosure and that IP going forward. The visibility shows if the IP is tied to agreements or licensing, helping your team respond quickly to opportunities or risks, help you forecast financial if those that IP is pegged to an exclusive or non-exclusive revenue generating license. Why is that important to the team, and what do we need to do to make sure that we're maintaining protection around that IP policy? And then finally, often probably the most forgotten part when it comes to academic and research organizations, government agencies, when it comes to IP, is the financial management part. Now, not forgotten that they have to spend large sums of money to get this IP, but how to link that as part of projects and budgeting. When you are using spreadsheets or outdated database style systems, when a finance team is the sole custodian of that IP data, and you don't want to add a lot of manual administration onto an already overworked team, how can you maintain tight control over your costs, keep your budgets in check without sacrificing coverage? The way that Wellspring Evolve is built is to do this seamlessly for you and help with that provide that complete kind of one-stop shop for those teams to be able to get that information into the system consistently, clearly, and accurately. So in summary, agility in IP management means integrating processes, data, and financial control into one seamless, flexible system. This not only saves time and money, but empowers you to make smart, strategic decisions faster, which is the real core of Wellspring Evolve. Rita, if you can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Now let's talk about one of the typical, though not always final, endpoints in the research commercialization process: contracts and agreements. Whether we're talking about licenses, NDAs, CDAs, or other agreements, these are often the product of a push-pull between multiple teams, offices, departments, and more so in 2025, systems. And let's not forget, many of these are closely tied to intellectual property and researcher distributions. In a university tech transfer office, for example, this typically means managing a wide variety of agreements, including NDAs to protect that confidential information during those discussions with external parties, those IP licenses that will enable external parties to use, commercialize, or access university-owned IP such as patents, software, or biological materials. Those joint research agreements that define in terms for collaboration research that may lead to commercialized IP. And of course, those material transfer agreements regulating the exchange of research materials between institutions or companies. Manually, all of these can be slow, error-prone, and incredibly resource-intensive. This is not an area where you can afford guesswork, bottlenecks, or inefficiency. Every delay or error here can slow down an innovation's path to impact. And that's important to note because there's always a kind of clear distinction between the teams. I don't need to see the contracts, that sits with those teams, or the contract don't need to see the IP because that sits with those teams. And that's often derived by the formation of the systems and software that you are using internally. And it doesn't have to be that way. Wellspring Evolve can house all of that type of information whether that's IP, disclosures, contracts agreement, or CRM functions, so that this can be a unified tool for across the offices. Next slide, please, Rita. And that's where Wellspring Evolve can come in. It can bring those workflows together into one diligent integrated system. And here's the game changer. It leverages AI to help you auto-populate agreement fields, can drastically reduce hours of manual administration. The Wellspring Evolve contracts and agreements section comes with dedicated features such as version control, e-signature functionality, complete oversight of terms and obligations. What you can see here on screen is an example agreement within our system with multiple different financial terms, different start points, what clauses they refer to, what types, and this is all customizable by the user. You can set up workflows to send internal and external reminders based on dates, time points, or execution entry points to make sure that you are all aware of what's coming up, what's coming due, and also for any potential licensee, what they've got coming due as well. Distribution, shares, and splits. You've gone through this painstaking process of capturing that disclosure, filing that IP portfolio, finding that licensing partner, agreeing to an agreement, kind of got that executed agreement through various rounds of red lines and version control. The e-signature has gone out. It's now been signed. And often that post-deal management can then be forgotten. You're on to the next project, you're on to the next deal, you're managing the next project. So a tool like Wellspring Evolve will help you to be able to carry on that way. We're not here to say, okay, you now need to plow hours of administration into that endpoint, set up those seamless workflows that have full financial capabilities to make sure that it's working for you whilst you have moved on to that next project. And if you're worried about kind of like a painful system overhaul, don't be. Evolve's API connections mean you don't always have to do a complete rip and replace across multiple different offices in an organization. Instead, it can work alongside your pre-existing successfully implemented tools, making the transition seamless while enhancing your current processes. This means that your team spends less time kind of pushing paper and more time pushing innovation. Next slide, please, Rita. And so in conclusion, I hope today that you've all come away with some actionable insights to consider as we enter the next academic year here in the UK, at least. And of course, given the allotted time, we have kind of barely scratched the surface on Wellspring Evolve specifically. And if you feel that from what you have seen today, if there was even one area that sparked interest, then we would love to continue the conversation and learn more about your specific needs. And as to my earlier point, there are no two organizations that are built the same. Thank you very much for your time and welcome kind of questions and queries that you may have.
Thanks, Matt. And just to sort of reiterate, if you do have questions, there's the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen that you can post some questions and we can pose them to Matt. Thank you, Matt. A great overview of the process of disclosure to filing, but also the role of software in that and the issues concerned. I may just have a couple of questions for you. First, just out of interest from my point of view, I think we assume that different institutions are at different stages of development. How many do you think are using software systems to sort of manage this process? And I hope very few are still in the days of a paper process. And when I started, archives in the basement. But how many institutions or what percentage do you think are sort of making their lives easier by using this kind of system?
Not as many as probably should. I think that's the fair answer. Across the UK, then kind of from our research that we think kind of around 50 to 60% of organizations have some type of software solution in place to help them. Now, whether that's full end to end, that number is probably quite a bit lower. Those are using disparate systems is still quite high. I think what's often been considered, particularly in the UK market, is that, and further afield as well, that is that offices say that they are too small to need a solution. And that's generally kind of been the view. And that's partly because of how software systems used to work. It used to be quite a time and labor intensive process to get up and running, to provide training, to keep it up to date. But that was then and this is now, where with the way that you can bulk update records, you can have APIs to make sure that the data is being updated on your behalf, whether I touched on, for example, email integrations or API connections with patent office databases. Even the smallest teams, and here at Wellspring also, we have some really small universities in terms of kind of number of disclosures or number of patents filed. If you compare them to, say, the top 50 organizations in the world, they have all seen significant impact. They have kind of jump themselves up the rankings in terms of new activity because they have those streamlined processes in place. And we are starting to see more and more offices who are kind of waking up to that idea that you don't have to have everything in place to have a system. And of course, there is sometimes a bit more of an obvious business case and need if you have one. But that's not always to say on the flip side of the coin that just because you have one, it's working for you. So yeah, really good question. I think that's something that we're exploring. And I think that whilst there are a lot of functions to tools like Wellspring Evolve, it shouldn't put any team off of any size, that it couldn't have significant impact, regardless if maybe you're a office that has tens or hundreds or thousands of patents or disclosures that you're managing. There will still be real world impact, which in most often is time saved for you as an office.
So I didn't prime Matt of the questions I was going to ask, and I was going to ask a follow up about the size of institution. So along that theme, also we have many institutions in the UK which are specialist or have diverse range, and you mentioned the role of non-patentable IP. So if you're an institution that is not a classic science and tech juggernaut, what's the relevance of these kind of systems if you're sort of more in, have a good spread across shape or humanities or non-patent IP of a variety of kinds?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So there's multiple different kind of record structures and functions that Evolve has that you could use IP. So whether that's trade secrets or copyright, for example, not necessarily your hard IP, but there are also other functions within our tool, such as project management, such as asset management, that those areas would fall under. And most offices, whilst they may have a bias to one or the other, whether that's a strong STEM kind of influence or and the such, there will still be some kind of non-patentable IP that they are managing. And even in those small organizations that don't, their priority is not to file a patent, for example, that can still arise. So the way that Wellspring Evolve is derived is to be able to give you that flexibility so that you're not kind of stuck with a system that should your organization or university decide to pivot, whether that's or change, whether that's through your own choice or whether that's just through the research that you have received from those disclosures, you're not pigeonholed into not being able to use that system. So absolutely, there's kind of functions there that would be helpful. Those agreements would really kind of kick into place at that point as well.
And a sort of, again, variation on the theme. So at KUK, we have the joy of not just being a university club. We have many members outside of university, of HEI, formal HEI structure. So whether they be research institutes or R&D businesses. So the relevance of these kind of systems beyond HEIs, perhaps you could speak to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Wellspring has a really large amount of clients who are not kind of your traditional academic organizations. So whether that's kind of research organizations, charities, government agencies, federal labs, and the such. And they all have a slight different workflow to the maybe more traditional kind of tech transfer, commercialization of disclosure, patent agreement, or spin out for the such. And that's where kind of the flexibility of our tool can come in as well. There is always a kind of an undercurrent theme of similarities of there will still be some kind of initial idea or project. There will still be a desired endpoint, whether that's a to commercialize or not to commercialize, to keep internally, to create products, to share that information that they have. And that's the kind of the flexibility that Wellspring provides. And that's why we've been able to work with some of the biggest and well-known charities and federal labs and government agencies in the UK and worldwide as well, because of that flexibility. So yeah, really good question. This is not just a tool that's built for a large UK uni or global uni. And the way that I've hopefully discussed some of the points today demonstrates that it's not about a one linear workflow and that's how you start and that's how you end, and there's no flexibility along the way.
No, sure. And we're acutely aware that it's a complex ecosystem that requires funders, research institutes, professional services companies, all to work together to get to that ultimate aim of delivering impact. I've got one final question for you. You mentioned in the seminar that you're more than welcome to sort of reach out to people and people to reach out to you and talk about how the system works. You also mentioned a September session where you have a sort of user club. So final question is, how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, great question. So if you head over to www.wellspring.com, then there's all the information there about kind of getting in contact with, kind of understanding more about our products and services, who we work with. And of course, as well, then I can send my direct email to everyone who is on this recording.
Cool.
And I'd be more than happy to speak directly with you at a time that works best for you.
Smashing. We will send out an email with a link to the recording and some other details alongside that to anybody that's listening, but also to people who are tuning in afterwards who weren't able to make it. With that, I think I'll thank you, Matt, on what is not quite a hot as day as yesterday, but still quite a hot day. Thank you for your time and thank you for explaining Wellspring Observe. Observe, Evolve. It's been great to hear from you. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.